I always said when I was Home Secretary and then Prime Minister, one of the things I had to do was to learn about the things that I had to forget. Because as a leader, very often there are things you just cannot talk to somebody else about. I think you can never 100% relax because you never quite know when there's going to be a phone call that you've got to respond to. Virtually every day brings tough moments.
Theresa Mary May has been duly elected to serve as a member for the said constituency.
Theresa May has served her country almost all of her life.
You're voting Conservative in the election?
No.
No.
I'll be voting.
Today, she's in the House of Lords, and she's co-president of Chatham House, a century-old London-based think tank that seeks to help governments and societies.
Her Majesty the Queen has asked me to form a new government, and I accepted.
From 2016 to 2019, she was Prime Minister and the leader of the Conservative Party. She served as Home Secretary for 6 years, the longest term in that role since 1951. A Member of Parliament for Maidenhead since the late 1990s, a local borough councillor before that. And she started her career working at the Bank of England.
I first thought about becoming an MP from about the age of 12 or 13.
Why?
It was about making a difference. That was the thing that I could do that would make a difference to people's lives, improve people's lives.
Do you remember the day where you say, right, I'm putting my hat in the ring?
I was a local councillor in one of the London boroughs, and like many women, I actually sort of waited for somebody to tap me on the shoulder and say, have you thought about this?
Why do you say like many women?
Well, I think it's one of the differences, certainly of my generation, probably still to a certain extent, is that men will often sort of map out, right, I'm going to be Prime Minister by the age of 25, whatever, and here's back of the envelope, here's how I'm going to do it. Whereas women tend to think, have I got the skills? Am I able to do it? And wait for somebody to say to them, I think you could.
The Labour Party may be about to spend several months of fighting and tearing itself apart. The Conservative Party will be spending those months bringing this country back together.
I had approached my time in Parliament in a different way. I wasn't one of those who joined dining clubs or had a gang around me or kept going into the bars and was drinking and so forth. I thought I was there to do a job. Some would say, oh, nonsense, you've got to be, making friendships here, there and everywhere. But actually, I think it's important that everybody recognises with clarity that being a Member of Parliament is a job. It's a huge privilege. You get there because the public has voted for you. You are there to work for them.
Would you describe yourself as an introvert?
I think some might describe me as an introvert. I don't think about describing myself as one thing or another. But I do think that I'm somebody who is, can be comfortable in their own skin and comfortable on their own, if you like. Between becoming an MP and becoming Home Secretary, I'd spent 13 years in opposition and 11 of those in the shadow cabinet. And then in 2010, when the Conservative Party didn't win an overall majority, we went into a coalition with the Liberal Democrats. David Cameron, the Prime Minister, asked me to become Home Secretary. So I had a steep learning curve.
Home Secretary is one of the most senior positions in the UK government. And it involves overseeing national security, immigration, counterterrorism, and policing. And then the briefings pile up.
And you go to the Home Office and the briefings are there.
And what was most daunting out of those briefings?
I think, well, the aspects that I hadn't had any real involvement with were the security issues.
What do you think was the toughest, actually, moment in being Home Secretary?
One of the real difficulties is dealing with tragedies when there are terrorist attacks.
The government has said plans to bomb the London Stock Exchange and a surge in Islamic State-inspired plots were foiled under Theresa May. Over the course of her term as Home Secretary, May had to respond to the threat of al-Qaeda and the emergence of ISIS.
As Home Secretary, I dealt with terrorist incidents, and indeed as Prime Minister, there had sadly also been some terrorist incidents.
By any measure, this past year has been exceptional. 5 terror attacks and even more foiled.
We cannot and must not pretend that things can continue as they are.
Salisbury was different in that, as we showed through the evidence we accumulated, it was another state.
Yeah.
This was a state deliberately attempting an assassination of somebody on British soil.
We can confirm that the man and woman have been exposed to the nerve agent Novichok.
I remember actually a very tough handshake and stare with, President Putin, I think in Osaka.
It's their first formal meeting since the Novichok attack in Salisbury, and before they'd even started talking, the Prime Minister's expression said it all. This was not going to be a cosy chat.
As a leader, you have to be prepared to meet other leaders who you don't agree with. And in this case, the Russian state had tried to assassinate somebody on British soil. A British citizen had died. And so, I was not going to be nice to him.
Message received. Was it received?
Well, I think with Vladimir Putin, he knows what he wants to do, and he's not too concerned about other people's views.
When do you decide to put your name actually in the ring to become Prime Minister?
The decision had to be taken quite quickly.
We at ITV News are calling this as a Leave victory, an extraordinary moment in British history.
Let June the 23rd go down in our history as our Independence Day.
After the 2016 Brexit referendum, the Remain side, which the Prime Minister David Cameron had been promoting, had lost. I was not prepared for him to step down the next day, which he did. I remember I was in my kitchen at home and put the television on and he came out.
I will do everything I can as Prime Minister to steady the ship over the coming weeks and months. But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
And of course, people start phoning you and you have to make a decision.
My pitch is very simple. I'm Theresa May and I think I'm the best person to be Prime Minister of this country.
I decided to go for it because although I had voted Remain and campaigned for Remain, i.e. staying in the European Union, I believed very much in democracy. And people had voted to leave, and therefore we should deliver that. In June, people voted for change, and a change is going to come. Change. But I wanted to see it being done in a way which brought the two sides together. I felt that we needed to leave, but in a way that the Remainers felt had addressed at least some of their concerns.
Theresa May held the top job for 3 years. She was handed a difficult set of cards: deliver Brexit while keeping Parliament and her party together.
Prime Minister, reports tonight that the ERG says there are enough letters to trigger a no-confidence vote on your leadership.
Her leadership was marred by Brexit paralysis and a poorly judged 2017 snap election gamble that fatally weakened her authority.
Is it time to go, Prime Minister? Will you still be Prime Minister in a week, Mrs May?
Prime Minister, are you confident you can win? Are you confident, Prime Minister?
Is it actually the most difficult thing as leader to know when to step down, when enough is enough? Or is it going through bad days?
I think sometimes the circumstances are sort of not exactly forced on you, but the circumstances become those where it's very difficult for you to continue. And that's what I had, of course, with when I couldn't get my Brexit votes deal through Parliament. It was clear that something had to give in the system, if you like, and that was me having to step down.
I will shortly leave the job that it has been the honour of my life to hold. The second female Prime Minister, but certainly not the last. I do so with no ill will, but with enormous and enduring gratitude to have had the opportunity
to serve the country I love.
What's your biggest regret, actually, from your time as Prime Minister? Is there something that you wish you'd done differently or not done?
I think one of the challenges, certainly, that we see here for Prime Ministers is that you do have to spend quite a bit of time on foreign policy, on foreign issues. That's you're representing your country. That's important. It's in the national interest. It perhaps doesn't leave as much time for being with your colleagues in Parliament. And I think certainly what was happening in the Brexit vote was those who had firm views on either side of the argument. I wonder whether if I'd been able to spend more time with them, we would have had a different result. I'm not sure.
But what surprised you the most, actually, being in charge?
It can be difficult to hold fast to your course as things are happening. And it's not just domestically, it's not just in parliamentary terms, it's what's happening internationally as well.
Do you feel like you had enough support, actually, back then by your cabinet and MPs?
Yes, I had good support, but I had deliberately, because of the Brexit issue, brought together a cabinet of people from both sides of the argument. I thought that was important, but it did mean there were some quite heated exchanges sometimes.
Order! Calm, Buddha-like. The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Do you think another Prime Minister could have managed any better at that time?
Now, you're asking me whether I did as good a job as anybody could have done or not, and I don't think that's for me to say. I think the one thing I would say that I probably didn't realise until later, is the extent to which those who had been very, very vehement leavers, the Brexiteers, were suspicious of a Prime Minister who had voted to remain. And however strongly I felt about delivering on the vote of the British people, however often I said that, I suspect that for some of them there was always that suspicion in the back of their mind.
Do you ever miss it, being Prime Minister?
You mustn't let yourself miss it too much, otherwise it would get to you. You know, politics can be brutal, and life has to move on.
You had after you more colourful Prime Ministers that then failed, actually, at their task. Did it vindicate, the way that you ran the government?
I'm not sure. You wouldn't use a term like vindicate. What I would say is I think that we, unfortunately, as a Conservative Party, were seen to have lost our value of integrity and our economic competence.
In my time, we faced the thunder of war and the threat of tyranny. Today, you face another power, artificial intelligence. It too may decide whether Britain marches ahead or stumbles behind.
Are there any more flags?
Yeah, there!
Good to meet you. Good to meet you.
We need a new approach that delivers a stronger economy and stronger borders. We owe that to our children.
We are pessimistic. I don't think there's any way that we can say that the economy is looking well.
It is a sort of a scary time for such stories because the party is moving more to the right.
Like in 1997, we got thrashed. So, and we're also having a pressure from the right this time.
I think we're at a tipping point here. So it could tip into something good, it could tip into something bad. She's shifting a bit more right, and I think the Conservative Party needs to shift a bit more right because we are a right-wing party.
I voted for Genric. I think he's a great leader. I think he could do great things for this party, but I think that Kemi, if she plays her cards right, can do the same.
The party has changed immensely, and obviously with the challenge of reform, a lot of people here are genuinely wondering what comes next for the party. And nearly all of my friends' groups are now reform. It's being generated a lot by social media, but also there's an energy there, and I would say a lot of politics is about vibes.
The Conservative Party is over.
over as a national party, over as the principal opposition to the left.
Reform UK is a right-wing political party founded by Nigel Farage, a leading voice in the Brexit campaign. Today, Reform UK positions itself as a populist alternative to the Conservatives.
The future is scary, and that's what reformers banked on. That's what they're using to create this chaos, but it's basically snake oil.
This is the Britain I stand for. If it is the Britain you stand for, then stand with me and let's build it together.
How do you think Kemi Badenoch is doing?
I think she's doing well in what is the most difficult job in politics. People naturally don't really want to hear from the leader of the opposition. It's doubly difficult if you've had a really bad election result, as we did.
But especially if you have Reform that's doing so well.
Reform makes a lot of noise. Reform has, now, is it 4 or 5 MPs currently?
But in the polls, they're doing very well in the polls.
But the only poll that ever counts is the general election. That is some years away.
You don't seem to be threatened by Nigel Farage.
There's always a role for a centre-right party. And I think that's what the Conservative Party is about. Nigel Farage's economic policies, frankly, they're all over the place. It's all very well doing well in opinion polls, but when it comes to it, people want to ask who should be in government. Critical to that will be the economy.
What does it mean being a leader in 2025 to you?
I think the world and politics are in a different place from where they have been over more recent decades. World leaders have a real responsibility in terms of looking at the future. It's not just about what is happening today.
But how difficult is it to lead with calmness in a world that feels like chaos?
This is why politics has changed, because with everything being so disrupted and unpredictable today, of course it's much harder to lead in those circumstances. But today's world is moving much faster. People's reactions have to be faster. And obviously as a leader, you can't always just react. You have to be able to think about things. You have to be able to work out what the best answer is, what is in your national interest, what is in the wider interest.
Do people still do that?
Yes, I think they do. Yes. I just think it's become harder for them to do it.
Why has the public become so cynical about politics and politicians? If we're being honest, I think we know why.
Trust in politicians in the UK is at or near an all-time low. Yet the people demand to hear from politicians on almost everything, in real time, and they're expected to find solutions to non-traditional problems like climate change, as well as standards of living and rising costs. But change is slow, especially in a democratic system.
There's a sense today that a lot of people feel their children aren't going to have a better life than they have, whereas in past, every generation has felt the next generation will be better off. And we have to find a way to ensure that we get the growth that responds to that.
Pressed by the press, the PM seemed a little rattled.
Nobody is going to have to pay for their care. Nobody is going to have, while they are alive, nobody is going to have to lose their family home.
Doesn't this show that you are really weak and wobbly, not strong and stable?
How difficult is that? I know you had a housing tax to actually fund some longer-term health care and didn't go down too well. I mean, again, the money is not infinite, right? There's only a pot of money, so you have to take it from somewhere.
The money is not infinite, but of course, if you have growth, then you're going to grow the sum of money that you're able to be dealing with. But governments do have to look carefully at ensuring that they're spending their money wisely. Governments must always remember it's not their money, it's the taxpayers' money that's being spent.
The youth don't necessarily, in our societies, believe in democracy.
It is a worry. It is a significant worry. And I think it's one of the challenges for politicians is to deliver for young people. There's a whole mixture of things here that has led to this, and including, obviously, the impact social media has had on the rise of populism. And so today, if you just shout loudly and say something, I'll do this tomorrow, people often desperate to feel that somebody's going to deliver for them, and, oh, well, that maybe is the way to go. Whereas actually, practically, being in government, you don't just deliver by snapping your fingers.
Any law proposed by the Prime Minister needs to be debated and approved by both houses of Parliament, the House of Commons and the House of Lords. The houses debate, scrutinize, delay, and amend or revise bills. And each proposed law goes through a staged process in both houses. This takes weeks, even months. Only in rare cases, bills are fast-tracked, like the trade agreement emergency on the heels of the Brexit deal that was struck at the last moment in late December 2020.
Social media makes people feel, politicians feel, MPs feel, ministers feel they've got to be talking about what they're doing the whole time, putting it out there. And the trouble with that is it means it focuses it much more on them rather than on what the overall good is, what they're trying to achieve.
And so how does that change the nature of politics?
Well, I think it is easier for populism to rise in a world where there is social media. In the past, you'd have old Joe sitting on the end of the bar in the pub, muttering into his pint of beer, and nobody took any notice of him because his views were either too extreme or too silly or ridiculous. Now old Joe mutters on social media, and all the other old Joes around the world respond, and suddenly it becomes a worldview. And when you get algorithms pushing people towards the sort of thing they want to see and have looked at and heard a lot, then it becomes much more difficult because people are not seeing the other arguments. And actually, in life, in politics, in government, very often you need to be able to mediate, to compromise. And in that absolutist world, that polarized world, compromise becomes a dirty word, and it isn't.
What do you think the new world order looks like?
Well, at the moment, I think what we need to make sure is that we don't just move into a world where power, strong men, and when people think about it, they will think about it as strong men, is the order of the day. And it's multilateral institutions that were set up in the 20th century. They need reform. They need to look at where we are today and how we can make sure that we can have that sense of the value of multilateral work and find structures in which to take that forward.
And have you ever had imposter syndrome?
No, except that I think we women tend always to sort of think a bit more about what we're doing and why we're here to do it, in that sense. So not a sort of, why me?
But that makes you a better leader if you question yourself rather than being, I guess, bold but irrational.
Well, I think it's important not to just assume that you're there because of some entitlement, that you're actually able to do the, to think about the job you're doing, what your mission is, what your goal is. I think that's important.
Theresa May, thank you so much for joining us.